They say you shouldn't make your job your identity. But when you're a single mom with no safety net rebuilding after a divorce and years of scraped-together survival, sometimes your job is the only stable thing you have. I'm Olivia Tran. I'm 41. For the past 5 years, I was the senior strategy lead at Halverson & Knox, a rising consulting firm in Seattle's tech corridor. My title wasn't flashy, but my work spoke for itself. I was the architect behind some of our highest-performing campaigns. My daughter Mila used to fall asleep on the couch while I pulled all-nighters preparing pitches. I told myself it would all be worth it someday. Turns out someday arrived just not the way I imagined. It was a Tuesday. The sky over South Lake Union was its usual gray, the air sharp with that faint metallic chill Seattle wears all winter. I was called into a meeting with our managing director, Matt Garrison. I knew the moment I walked into his office that something was off. The air smelled like burnt coffee and ego. He didn't look up right away, just slid a folder across the table with a sigh too casual to be sincere. "Restructuring," he said flatly. "Nothing personal," I blinked. My heart didn't drop, it seized. Inside the folder was my termination letter. Effective immediately, I tried to steady my voice. "Is this about the Faulkner contract?" He smirked. That smug practice smirk. "We've decided to pivot in a new direction. Fresh blood, more dynamic voices." That contract had been the biggest pitch in the firm's history, worth $20 million. I'd spent 3 months building it, analyzing metrics, crafting growth models, refining the strategy down to the decimal. 2 weeks ago, I'd found the final proposal printed out on Matt's desk, with my name stripped off completely. When I asked about it, he just waved it off. "Relax, Olivia, you'll get internal credit. This is how it works." Apparently, how it worked also included firing me once the deal closed. I didn't cry, didn't shout, just sat there as he avoided my eyes and called in someone from HR to escort me out. As if I was a threat. As if 5 years of loyalty could be packed into a cardboard box and wiped with a deactivated badge. Walking through the glass lobby past the receptionist who wouldn't meet my gaze, I held my head high. But my insides were shaking. Mila was still at school. Rent was due. My savings weren't enough. I'd given that company everything: missed birthdays, holidays, sleep, and in return I was erased like I'd never mattered. "This is how the real world works," Matt had said. He thought that was the end of it. But he didn't know what I'd saved. And he had no idea who I still knew. The elevator ride down felt longer than the 5 years I'd given them. I didn't speak to the HR rep beside me, some woman named Marlene, who avoided eye contact like it was policy. She handed me my final check and a thin envelope labeled "Exit Materials," as if I was a hotel guest checking out after a long, forgettable stay. I stepped into the parking garage and froze. The air was colder down there, thick with concrete dust and old rain. I opened my car door but didn't get in. Instead, I leaned against the driver's side, clutching the cardboard box, filled with the pieces of my professional life, my favorite pen, a framed photo of Mila from 3rd grade, a half-used planner still bookmarked at next week's meetings. I stood there for what felt like hours. It wasn't just the firing, it was the erasure. The way they'd used me and then pushed me out without so much as a footnote. I thought about the nights I stayed late at the office telling Mila over the phone to warm up leftovers. The weekend I missed her violin recital because we had a pitch deadline. The morning she asked if I'd always be too tired to eat breakfast with her. All of that, every sacrifice, every compromise, was so they'd see me as serious, valuable, indispensable. And yet here I was. Disposable. A lump rose in my throat, but I swallowed it back. I wouldn't cry in this garage. Not today. I finally slid into the driver's seat, the box in my lap, and stared out through the windshield at the wet gray wall ahead. Matt had called it a pivot. I called it what it was: betrayal dressed in corporate language. He thought I'd disappear, that I'd slink away quietly and make room for his next golden boy. But I hadn't survived everything I had to end like this. He closed the door on me. He just didn't realize I still had the blueprints. The Faulkner project had started like most others with a vague brief and impossible expectations. "We need something big," Matt had said, pacing in front of the whiteboard like he was orchestrating a symphony. "They're scaling fast and want a blueprint that can hold under pressure." I'd nodded, already calculating. Growth forecasts, margin risks, integration timelines. It wasn't magic, it was discipline, precision. And I had both. For 3 months, I poured myself into that strategy. Every model was built from scratch, every slide crafted after midnight, while Mila slept beside me on the couch, her math homework still open. I ran simulations through weekends, edited projections while stirring pasta. My laptop was an extension of me tabs full of notes, formulas, annotations. I didn't complain. Not when Matt handed off last-minute feedback from the partners. Not when he took credit for my ideas in meetings with the board. I just kept building, because the work mattered, because I wanted Mila to see that women could lead quietly, surely brilliantly. 2 days before the big pitch, I printed a final draft for proofreading. That's when I saw it on Matt's desk. The proposal, my proposal, same layout, same strategy, same graphics, but without my name. Instead, the cover page read, Lead Consultant Matthew Garrison. I stared at it for a long time, the fluorescent office lights buzzing faintly above me. When I asked him about it, he chuckled. Relax, Olivia, it's still your work. We just need consistency for client-facing materials. You'll get internal recognition. Internal recognition. That phrase had sat like rot in my gut. But I'd let it go, told myself it didn't matter, that the results would speak for themselves. And they did. The Faulkner team loved the pitch, signed within a week. Emails flew, champagne-popped pats on the back were exchanged. Except mine. I'd gone back to my desk and reopened my laptop. There in my cloud archive sat every version, every timestamp, every spreadsheet with my initials. I didn't save them to protect myself. I saved them because I believed in documentation. Turns out that habit was about to become the one thing Matt hadn't planned for. He stole my credit, but he couldn't steal the proof. That night, the apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the dishwasher and the occasional creak from the radiator. Mila had fallen asleep on the couch again, still in her hoodie and mismatched socks, a cold slice of pizza on the plate beside her. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop, open fingers, hovering over the keys. In one tab, I'd pulled up my cloud archive. Every draft of the Faulkner proposal was there, early versions with margin notes in my handwriting. Internal feedback threads with Matt's short replies. Even a scanned copy of my original pitch outline dated and signed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt numb. Betrayal leaves you hollow before it makes you angry. But underneath the numbness, something stirred. A low, quiet pulse. Not rage, not yet, resolve. I clicked into my contacts. The list was long, but one name sat at the top like a glowing ember. I'd forgotten about Sophia Lynn. 6 years ago, she was a startup founder, looking for her Series B round strategy. I'd been a junior associate then, building models for companies like hers, while the senior consultants chased glory. Sophia had taken the time to thank me personally. If you ever want to work with people who actually care about where credit goes, she'd said you know how to find me. I never followed up, until now. I clicked compose. Subject. The real author of your proposal. Hi Sophia, I hope this message finds you well. I'm not sure if you remember me, we worked together during your second funding round. I recently left Halverson and Knox, and there's something you should know about the Faulkner proposal they just presented. I paused. My hand trembled slightly. Was this wise? Was I ready? But then I thought about Matt's smirk. The way he'd said, this is how the real world works. And I remembered Mila's question, Mom. Why do you always look so tired? I wasn't tired. I was done being used. I hit send. What I didn't know was that this email, this small act of defiance, would change everything. The reply came faster than I expected. At 7:14 the next morning, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Sophia Lynn. The message was short. Olivia. Of course I remember you. I still use the growth matrix you built for us back then. Thank you for reaching out. Can we talk this afternoon? I have questions and an opportunity you might want to hear about. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. My heart thudded loud enough to drown out every doubt. By 2 p.m., I was pacing my living room in a sweater too warm for the room and trying not to rehearse every word. When the call finally came through, her assistant patched me in immediately, Olivia, Sophia said. Her voice hadn't changed, still firm, clear, no wasted syllables. I've reviewed what you sent. I braced myself. I'm furious. I blinked. I thought you should know the proposal wasn't written by the person who presented it to you. I knew that the moment I saw it, she said. It had your fingerprints all over it. The tension in my chest eased slightly. She asked questions, sharp ones about the logic behind the forecast model, the contingency plan for labor disruptions, the timeline assumptions. I answered every one without hesitation, not because I'd studied the proposal, because I'd lived it. After a pause, she said, "I'm terminating the contract with Halverson and Knox." My breath caught. "And I don't reward liars, but I don't waste good strategy either. I'm launching something new. I want you as my partner. CEO title, full control. Do you want in?" The world tilted slightly. I was still standing, but everything was about to change. I didn't answer right away. Sophia's offer hung in the air like a door cracked open sunlight, flooding through but still unfamiliar, almost too bright to trust. Partnership. Full control. I'd spent so many years being told I wasn't leadership material, that I was too quiet, too methodical, too focused on details. All the things that kept men like Matt in charge while women like me worked twice as hard for half the credit. Now here was Sophia offering everything I'd never dared to ask for. "I need to think about it," I said, heart pounding. "Of course," she replied, "but don't take too long. You've always had the mind for building. You just never had the space to lead." When we hung up, I sat still for a long time. I thought about the years I'd spent shaping other people's visions. The late nights, the quiet compromises, the moments I swallowed my voice just to keep a job. And I thought about Mila, what she saw, what she believed was possible for me and for her. That evening, I sat on the edge of her bed while she brushed her hair. "They fired you," she asked, her voice small. "They did, but you didn't cry." I smiled. "Not yet." She turned to me, eyes wide. "What are you going to do now?" I paused. "I think I'm going to run something of my own." The next morning, I called Sophia. "I'm in." Her response was immediate. "Welcome aboard, Olivia. The paperwork is in motion. Our firm will be called Linen Trans Strategy Partners. You'll be the CEO." 2 hours later, the headlines hit. Faulkner Industries terminates contract with Halverson and Knox, citing leadership concerns. Somewhere in downtown Seattle, Matt was probably choking on his espresso. And I was just getting started. The email came first, forwarded from Sophia, short and almost pitiful. "Hi, Sophia. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We'd appreciate the chance to discuss next steps regarding the Faulkner account. Please advise on scheduling a call. Matt Garrison," beneath it. Sophia had typed only 5 words. "He wants to talk to the CEO. Your move." I didn't hesitate. "Set it up," I replied. The next morning at exactly 10:00 a.m., my phone rang. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Hello," there was a beat of static, then his voice tight polished, pretending not to panic. "Hi, this is Matt Garrison calling from Halverson and Knox. I believe there may have been some confusion regarding I cut him off. This is Olivia Tran," I said, letting the calm settle in. "You're speaking with the new CEO of Linen Trans Strategy Partners." Silence. Not the passive kind, the stunned kind, the kind that follows when a man realizes the person he discarded is now sitting where he used to stand. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Olivia, I wasn't expecting—" "No," I said. "You weren't." He tried to backpedal, mentioning shared goals, potential collaboration, mutual interest. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. The call ended with his voice cracking slightly, still trying to sound in control. But the truth was, control had changed hands. And this time, I wasn't letting go. It didn't take long. By Thursday, I started hearing whispers from old co-workers still stuck inside Halverson and Knox. Matt was spinning a new version of the story. According to him, I hadn't been fired. I'd resigned voluntarily due to performance mismatches and incompatibility with evolving team dynamics. In other words, I was difficult. I rolled my eyes so hard, I nearly gave myself a headache. Then came the LinkedIn post. Glossy corporate language about navigating transitions and learning from recent organizational shifts. No names were mentioned, but the timing was clear. They were trying to bury the damage. They didn't know I wasn't alone anymore. Julia, a former project manager I'd mentored, texted that afternoon. "Olivia, I know what they're saying. I've got your back. And I've got screenshots." Then came Darren, one of the analysts I'd trained. "If you need someone to confirm who really led Faulkner, I'm in." By the end of the day, I had a folder on my desktop, labeled receipts. Performance reviews Matt had altered. Emails he forwarded with my name removed. Slide decks where lead Olivia Tran had mysteriously become lead executive team. It wasn't just me. People I barely knew reached out. Whispered stories of their own erasure strategies, handed off promotions stalled, voices dismissed. Some were still at the firm afraid to speak. Others had left quietly thinking no one would care. You were the first to walk away, Julia wrote. But now that you have, the rest of us aren't as scared. By Friday, I had over a dozen witness statements and a growing collection of digital proof. I hadn't planned to start a movement. But when truth knocks loud enough, you either open the door or it blows it off the hinges. The cease and desist arrived Monday morning. A thick envelope slid under my office door, stamped with Halverson and Knox's corporate seal. My name typed in bold across the top. They accused me of misappropriation of proprietary information and intentional client poaching. They wanted me to shut down, back off, and disappear. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly predictable. They'd underestimated the one thing I'd always done. Without fanfare, I kept records. I called Dana, my lawyer. Smart, precise, unshakable. They're bluffing, she said after reading the letter. But we won't just respond, we'll push back. By the end of the day, she filed a countersuit. Defamation, wrongful termination, professional misrepresentation. Attached were 5 witness statements from former colleagues, time-stamped emails showing Matt's name swaps, and a detailed timeline that made it impossible to pretend I hadn't authored the Faulkner proposal. I don't just want them to drop it, I told her. I want them to regret sending it. 2 days later, the cease and desist was withdrawn without a word, no apology, no clarification. Just silence, which in legal terms was as close to confession as I was going to get. I stood in my office that evening staring out the window at the glowing Seattle skyline. They tried to scare me quiet, but I'd already built too much, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The article went live on a Wednesday. The title hit like a matchstick on dry timber, From a Race to Executive, the Woman Who Outsmarted the System. It told the whole story: how I was fired, how the Faulkner deal was stolen, how I built something better in its place. The reporter had done her homework. She even referenced internal memos leaked by anonymous employees. By noon, my inbox was overflowing. You gave me courage. Your story is mine. Different names, same betrayal. I cried reading this. Thank you for speaking. Messages poured in from Boston, Houston, San Diego. HR managers, project leads, new mothers, senior analysts, women in every industry who had once stayed silent because they thought they were alone. I read every single one. I responded to as many as I could. Then I closed my laptop and sat in stillness, the noise of the world fading behind the quiet knowledge settling into my bones. This story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to anyone who had been minimized, overwritten, or pushed aside. What I started in silence had become a rallying cry, not for revenge, but for recognition. By the end of the week, 2 executives had quietly resigned from Halverson and Knox. No announcements, just vanished bios and a flurry of internal emails marked confidential. Anonymous sources confirmed the board was scrambling. Investors were asking questions they'd ignored for years. And then something I never expected. An email from Margot Reyes, a name I hadn't heard in a decade. One of the original co-founders of the firm, long retired, long silent. Olivia. I've been following everything. I believe you. I saw what Matt became. I didn't fight it when I should have. But if you're ready to go all the way, I can help. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Ballard. Margot looked older. Her hair gray at the edges, but her eyes still sharp as ever. She didn't waste time. He erased you because he feared you, she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Meeting transcripts, performance manipulation logs. A presentation deck Matt once pitched to the board titled, Restructure Plan, Quiet Replacements Before IPO. My throat tightened. This isn't just incompetence, she continued. It's systemic. I stared at the flash drive in my hand, the weight of it far heavier than its size. You don't owe me anything, Margot said. But I stayed silent once. I'm done with that. That night, I uploaded the files to a secure folder and sent them to Dana. Her response came in 2 words. We're ready, we didn't hesitate. Dana and I compiled everything: Margot's files, internal emails, performance tampering logs, the original Faulkner drafts, and submitted them to both the state's labor board and the SEC. At the same time, we gave an exclusive to the Seattle Ledger. The article dropped Monday morning. Culture of retaliation inside the collapse of Halverson and Knox. The fallout was immediate. Regulatory investigations were launched within 4 hours. Whistleblower protections were invoked. A flood of former employees came forward, finally free to speak. This time they weren't whispering. What had started as a quiet firing had become something far bigger. Something louder than I ever imagined. Reporters called it a reckoning. But to me it felt like justice finally found its voice. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was holding up a mirror. By the start of the new quarter, Linen Trans Strategy Partners was officially live. Our team wasn't built from resumes and referrals, it was built from purpose. People who had been overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. People who knew what it felt like to be erased and vowed never to do that to someone else. I handpicked every hire, not just for talent, but for integrity. Our conference table didn't seat egos, it held problem solvers, listeners, builders. Within weeks, we landed 2 major clients, one of them a direct competitor of Halverson and Knox. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't look back. Because this company wasn't built to prove a point. It was built to prove a principle. That strategy can be smart without being cutthroat. That leadership doesn't have to exploit to be effective. And that people who build quietly can still lead boldly. My name was on the door now. But more importantly, it was in the room. It was late when I got home. The house was quiet, the lights soft. Mila was curled up on the couch, sketchbook in her lap, her earbuds in. She looked up when I walked in and grinned. "You're on TV again," she said. I chuckled, kicking off my shoes. "Am I?" She nodded. "They called you a disruptor, said you're changing the industry." I sat beside her, pulling the blanket over both of us. "Is that a good thing, the best?" she whispered. We sat there in silence, the kind that feels full, not empty, and I thought about what had been taken from me: credit, trust, time, and what I had taken back: my voice, my place, my name. This was never about revenge. It was about visibility, about power, about rewriting the rules so that the next Olivia, the next Mila wouldn't have to fight this hard just to be seen. I kissed the top of her head. She leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just survive, Mom. You changed the game." And for the first time in years, I believed her.